Welcome to Chapter 12. Just like Chapter 10 and Chapter 11, we're just going to be working through a couple crosstabs. I know this is beating a dead horse, so at this point, if you feel like you have a good grasp on the crosstabs, you can stop. At this point, you don't actually have to go through Chapter 12, but if you're still kind of tripped up on it and you want to go through the steps a couple more times, go ahead and walk through with me. So again, it's very important that you open up the data set that was under Module 6. This chapter will use a variable, actually a scale that was created in Chapter 8. And if you recall, in Chapter 8, I said, do not follow the book, follow what I said instead. So I had to go in and create that variable in order for us to walk through the book and be able to do their exercises. So if you're going to go through Chapter 12, make sure you open that Chapters 10, 11, and 12 data set. And let's move forward. So again, we're just doing crosstabs. This time we're going to be examining independent variables and how it relates to the abortion index that they had created in Chapter 8. Again, and remember in Chapter 8, we added all the variables together, then divided by the number of variables, and they did this weird, funky little count thing. So I had to create that weird index that they had created, but it's on here so we can go through and start doing some more crosstabs. So the first crosstab that they recommend in demonstration 12.1 is examining whether the respondent's sex or gender has an impact on someone's support or non-support for abortion. So what we're going to do is pop in here again to crosstabs. This is from Chapter 11, so we want to get rid of that. Our independent variable here would be sex. Put that in the columns. Our dependent variable is actually abort. That is the name of the variable of the scale. So make sure the cells, the column box is checked. Once that's okay, click OK. Again, you will see the crosstab. And here you will look at whether or not there's support or differences in support for males and females for someone to have an abortion, whether there's full support, conditional support, or no support whatsoever. And so if you look across this for support, so yes, there's full support. There's not many differences between males and females. When you get to conditional support, you start to see a little bit of a differential where males are actually more likely to have more conditional support than females. And then when you look at disapproval, you'll see that females are actually a little bit more likely to not support abortion than when they're compared to their male counterparts. The next crosstab that we're going to do, or the next relationship that is going to be examined, is looking at age. So instead of looking at sex as an independent variable, we are going to come down and look at age. And the age that we're going to use again is that age cat variable. That's that age that was collapsed into categories that was done in Chapter 7. So if we scroll down here again, you'll see the age here is the independent variables. You'll see the dependent variable right here. And if you look, the 40 to 64 year old crowd looks to have the most support for abortion. Scrolling down, you will see that the 65 and older crowd has the most conditional support, and the under 21 crowd is most likely to disapprove of abortion in any case scenario, according to the index. So again, you're just interpreting these percentages as you go across. Another factor that may impact, another independent variable that may impact someone's support for abortion is their religious affiliation. So we can come down here and change out the independent variable. So we're going to get rid of age and we're going to pop in religion here. Again, your cells should still be checked. Click OK. We scroll down, we can see if there's a difference among the religions. So you can see that the Jewish religion has quite a high supporting rate. 90.9%, almost 91% of people with a Jewish faith support abortion. And that is followed by people who have no religious affiliation. If you look at conditional support, you see the most conditional support is by Catholics. And then finally, if you look at no support or disapproving, you will see that the vast majority, or about a third of Protestants, do not support abortion. So we can now look at another factor that may influence abortion, and that is how often people go to church. So we're going to change out that independent variable again. So get rid of religion as an independent variable. Scroll up, and we're going to look for church attendance. Remember, that was that recoded variable from chapter 7. Again, check the scale or the cells, make sure the column percentage is checked. Click OK. Scroll down, and we're going to interpret these lines again. So people who never go to church, right, because here are the different categories of church attendance. People who never go to church are most likely to support abortion. People who seldom go to church are most likely to have conditional support. And people who go to church about weekly have the highest rate of disapproval, or are least likely to support abortion. So what you could argue is that the more often that you go to church, the less likely you are to approve abortion by this. Because if you look, remember we talked about these diagonal categories. You're seeing there is a little bit of a diagonal here. The less often you go to church, the more you support. The more often you go to church, the less often you go to church, the more you are likely to support. The less often, or the more often you go to church, the less likely you are to support. Sorry, got tongue-tied there. Another factor that may contribute to somebody's view on abortion could be their political ideation. So we can look at demonstration 12.4 and come back to descriptive statistics. We're going to pop out church attendance as your independent variable and come down to political ideation, or that political recoded. So here we're going to look at liberal, moderate, and conservative and see how they view on their approval ratings. So if you look at liberal, you see the liberal ideation is most likely to support. When looking at the conditional support, you see the moderates are most likely to have conditional support. And when you're looking at disapproval, you see that conservatives are more likely to have disapproval compared to either liberals or moderates. The last independent variable that the book goes through, it's actually a group of independent variables that the book goes through, is sexual attitudes. So attitudes towards premarital sex, homosexual relationships, attending X-rated movies, and whether or not someone had sex with a casual date within the past year. So again, before we're all keeping, or all those independent variables are keeping the dependent variable of approval of abortion or not approval, but there's different variables, independent variables that are going to come into play. So the first one is premarital sex, and that is pre-mar right here. So that will be the first one here. The next one is homosexuality, and that goes here. The third one is X-rated movies, which goes here. And then the last one is casual sex, or what they have kind of dictated as pickup sex. Where you have these 4 independent variables, it really comes in handy to, put this right click here and have display variable names and sort alphabetically. It makes it pretty easy to kind of go and find those variables. Go and click on cells, look at column, click OK, and you're going to see we have 4 tables that pop up. Again, that case processing summary table, do not worry about. First one is our first independent variable, and we can see this is asking about sex before marriage, and people who argue that sex before marriage is not wrong at all or feel that way are most likely to support abortion. Among the conditional support, you see people who think that sex before marriage is almost always wrong has the most conditional support for abortion. And the people who argue or believe that sex before marriage is always wrong are also the most likely to disapprove someone having an abortion. People's view on homosexual relationships compared to abortion. You see that individuals who believe homosexual relationships aren't wrong at all seem most likely to support abortion. People who believe that homosexual relationships are almost always wrong have the most conditional support, and those who think homosexual relationships are almost always wrong are also most likely to disapprove of abortion. Looking at X-rated movies, you can see those who have seen X-rated movies in the last year are most likely, compared to those who haven't, to approve of abortion. That there's really no difference when it comes to conditional support between those who have seen an X-rated movie and those who have not. And that individuals who have not seen an X-rated movie within the last year are more likely to disapprove of abortion than those who have. And then finally, people who have had casual sex with a date in the last year, looking at their viewpoints of abortion. Those who have had casual sex within the last year are more likely to approve of abortion than those who did not. When it comes to conditional support, those who have not had casual sex within the last year are more likely to have conditional support for abortion. And finally, there's only less than a 5% differential from those people who have had casual sex and those who have not in the last year in their disapproval. But regardless, those who have had pickup sex in the last year or casual sex in the last year are actually more likely to disapprove of abortion. So that is it for chapter 12. Again, it was very similar to chapters 10 and 11, just kind of hammering in those crosstabs for you. If you have any questions, any concerns, please email me, please give me a phone call, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you.